Hello and welcome back, Eddie Radosovich. George Stoya here from the SoonerScoop.com studios. Josh McCuistion back in Houston HQ, and a Monday Game Day Rewind. Obviously, that was rough. I know that all three of us have gone through and rewatched. Josh, you're doing the Monday Morning Idiot right now on the Crimson Corner, and there's plenty to get into. I know that we entered now what is the first road game of the week. George and I will be headed out to Auburn on Friday morning, but there's a lot to get into just in terms of this offense and the disaster that was.
They stink.
Jackson Arnold was benched, obviously, in the second quarter on Saturday night of the 25-15 loss to Tennessee. And we enter this week where, I don't know. What do you guys want to call it? Is it a quarterback controversy? Is it a quarterback competition? I think that, George, we kind of put our thoughts out there on Saturday night in wake of the game. Obviously on the instant reaction that a lot of you have viewed here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel, and then obviously in the Eskridge Lexus postgame podcast. We'll just go here. We'll start with you, Josh. Good evening. Good afternoon. How are we? You're doing the Lord's work watching that BS again from Saturday night, but where do they go from here offensively? Jackson Arnold wasn't good. He was awful on Saturday night. The decision-making was terrible at times. Obviously, the 3 turnovers have become an issue as well. Where do they go from here just in terms of a quarterback situation in Northern America?
Well, Eddie, I mean, much in the way that you have you once freed Lindsey Street, if there is a controversy, we might have to write some sort of T-shirt campaign, or we're going to have some flags. Now, I don't know about Free Mike Hawk as a that could be controversial. There could be some real problems there. But to me, I don't know how you watched what we saw on Saturday and think Michael Hawkins doesn't deserve to get a chance to start. He gets what everybody saw against Tennessee may not be what we see. I think people need to prepare themselves that it's not likely he's just going to roll out and everything's going to click and it's all going to work. That's not the most probable outcome. But if nothing else, if no other way you want to look at this, Jackson Arnold needs some time to gather himself. Like that, he just looked like a guy, and I know you guys said it in the postgame pod, look like a guy seeing ghosts out there.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the worst performances by an Oklahoma quarterback in a long time.
The thing that makes it tough, and we're seeing Jackson here as we get into what is about to be some of the more critical errors.
Guys, he ranks, I just want to read this.
Yeah, go ahead.
He ranks last among Power 4 starters in total yards per play at 4.73. That's behind DJU, Donovan Smith, and Connor Wakeman. Cade McNamara for Iowa. I mean, it's bad.
It got to a point, and I think that, George, we've been pretty outspoken in terms of Jackson Arnold and the hype that went into this season. I think that it was kind of one of those nails in the coffin just in terms of you got to try somebody else. And when Michael Hawkins got out there on Saturday night, he looked good. The offense looked better.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Jackson is we all know he has talent, right? Like we know he can throw the ball and he can move around and he's got some great athletic ability. But it's through 4 games and really 5 games going back to the bowl game, the decision-making just hasn't been good enough. And I think the one thing you saw from Hawkins, and we'll see if this can continue. I think it was an interesting situation that he was put into, obviously a really tough situation. We'll see if that decision-making can be good, but he was sharp. Like he was getting the ball out quick. If it wasn't there, he was taking off and running. If the offensive line broke down, he was able to make some different plays and escape that, as good as Jackson is at running the ball, he can't do some of those things. And I think as an offense, when you talk about, and we'll get into what they should do moving forward, but when you talk about maybe changing some things up schematically, I think you can simplify some things, do some different stuff with the quarterback run game with Hawkins that could maybe open some things up. And defenses having to account for his ability to just take off and be a home run hitter, I think can maybe help you a little bit. He doesn't fix all the issues. There's a lot of issues on this offense. Changing the quarterback doesn't fix all of those, but I do think it helps you a little bit. And if anything, you look at Hawkins and you say, just avoid the catastrophe. Sure. Because that's the one thing Jackson has not been able to do is avoid the catastrophe. Even going back to the Alamo Bowl, like the turnovers were, I think 2 of them were returned for touchdowns, right? The Farouk one, which I can't remember if they ruled out a fumble.
They
or
ended up ruling it a fumble, I believe.
But again, and that one's not on Jackson, but I believe he was gave up. What was the fumble late in that game? Was it returned for a touchdown or close to a touchdown?
It was basically returned. I believe it was a touchdown. I believe it was a touchdown.
It's those moments that it's not only is he turning the ball over in like key spots, they're becoming massive turnovers and turned into points by the team.
Case in point. I mean, you're taking points off the board with the fumble inside the 5. Yep. You give it right back one play later. The lateral or whatever that was to Zion Raggins, it can't happen. It costs your team field position, obviously points. Josh, I think we all agree it's not just Jackson Arnold. This thing is so complex just in terms of what they're doing offensively. That goes for play calling. I think we were pretty critical about the coaching staff. I thought it was a failure of a game plan going into Saturday night. Running the ball right at him. My radio partner, Ryan Chapman, put it best from what I could tell this morning on Monday, just in terms of it was a very arrogant game plan to think that you could go in there and run the ball right at him. We could get into all that stuff later, but just from a quarterback perspective, what did you like from Michael Hawkins? What did you see from Michael Hawkins? It takes some massive stones to be thrown into the situation that he was on Saturday night.
Yeah, I've said it over and over again. I mean, you can talk about it with the runs. You can talk. That was ballsy. I mean, like that guy just went out there and played like nothing to lose here. And to a degree, that's what it was. Like, and that's going to be the interesting thing to see going forward. Can he keep that same composure when defenses are preparing for him, when the game is still in the balance, when, all these things start to mount? Now, dealing with Mike for the last couple of years, he is a very cool and calm person. Like, I've never seen him get real wound up in any direction. I think that's just his personality. And I think maybe there is a part of him that is geared to handle that. As far as what I liked, though, aside from just, like I said, kind of the confidence and the swagger, and I thought the offense fed off of it. I thought there were people making plays that you're like, where's that been? Like, where's that been from you before? So I saw some things I liked that he was, I don't know if he's directly responsible, but it felt like people were responding to him. I loved how decisive he was. When he makes a decision, he rips it. There's not a second thought. Don't get me wrong. There may be a time down the road where like, oh, okay, you gotta think that one out a little bit farther. But with what Oklahoma's been putting out there for the previous 3.5 games, they needed someone who was just going to pull the trigger. There's a part of me that just thinks Jackson Arnold never recovered from the Arizona game and all the people doubting him and all the questions. And I feel like that got in his head. And he was playing those first 3 games to not make a mistake. And I understand you like George was saying, you want to avoid catastrophe. But if you're sitting there the whole time like, don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up, what are you really going to accomplish? Like, you're going to get a bunch of 5-yard, hook routes and stuff. And that's great. But eventually you're going to have to take the shackles off and start trying to make some plays. But again, I love the decision-making. I love the release, guys. Like, you watch him, how quickly the ball comes out of his hands. It is unbelievable. Again, there's some stuff to build on here. I'm torn between tempering enthusiasm and at the same time saying, like, there's a few things you can buy into here. There's some reason for belief.
I was going to say about Jackson, too, I think you nailed it, Josh. Like, I think it was, going back to the bowl game, like, he was trying to avoid making the big mistake, and then that forced him into making the big mistake. Like, I think he was, we were watching the Aaron Murray thing, this morning, and him break down, which was a really good breakdown of the game and some of the decision-making. It felt like he had his mind made up before a lot of these plays of like, this is what I'm going to do. And instead of reacting to the defense. And then I think he just forced some things that weren't there. I mean, the interception, like we talk a lot about the fumbles and the one inside the 5, that just can't happen, right? You can't lose the ball there. The play to the lateral, that's a panic, right? He's panicking there. Maybe the most damning one I think is the interception, because he had his mind made up that he's going to throw this football to J.J. Hester, despite it being like not only the guy there that made the interception, but it's well covered on the back end. Like there was nothing there. And that's just Jackson, I think, before the play already having his mind made up and forcing a ball that didn't need to be forced. And those are the things that you can't do. Whereas I think what you saw from Hawkins was he played loose, he threw guys open, and he made good decisions. Like Josh said, I think his decision making, how quick it was, like that's what you have to have when you have an offensive line struggling. Like it was like 1-2, throw the ball or take off, and that's what they need moving forward with this group, is somebody that can be back there and just make quick decisions, whatever those are.
Oklahoma is yet to get to the practice field here on Monday. Obviously, they practice in the evening. Brent Venables will have his coaches show on Monday night. We'll talk to some of the players as well, so maybe try to delve into a little bit more about how this is going to be handled. Do you guys find it fascinating or interesting how this will be handled by the OU coaching staff, who's obviously under a lot of fire? They have to find some type of success moving forward here, not just this week against Auburn, obviously going into the bye week, but then you come out of that bye week with Texas and the trip to the Cotton Bowl. It's kind of a very important moment, not just for the staff, but for Brent Venables in general, how they kind of navigate these waters.
I think you gotta win. You gotta win on Saturday and show some life offensively. Like it's not just win, but like show something. You know, whether it's Michael Hawkins and you have some different run schemes or whatever it is, you got to find some success, because if they go down and they lose this week and the offense looks as bad as it was this past week, or
to a bad Auburn team. Let's
right.
get that out.
Yeah,
in
Auburn's
front of
not
this.
good. If that happens,
I don't know if Oklahoma's good offensively, obviously.
I think that they have to seriously consider making a change at play caller, just because you're going into the bye week. You've got the huge game against Texas. Like, I think that if they go out and they play another stinker and even Hawkins looks bad, I think you have to, if you're Brent, you have to be like, we have to do something differently. I don't know. Josh, do you agree with that?
Is it a foregone conclusion, too, that would you just, from, I guess, Monday evening when you hit the practice field, Michael Hawkins is your number one quarterback. He's going to get those reps.
Yes.
He has to. Like, again, this isn't solely because, like, I think Michael Hawkins is the answer. He may be. We're going to find out a lot more, in my opinion, next week, because I agree with George. He has to be your starter. But this is also, Jackson Arnold's not in the right headspace. Like something's off. I don't know if it's confidence. I don't know if it's second guessing himself. The interception that George was talking about, I mean, and obviously the one we all saw, not only did he make up his mind, he's still late getting the ball there. Like even if you make up your mind, the ball is late and behind JJ Hester. So like something's just not wrong. Because again, I couldn't agree more. We all believe this is a talented football player, and we've seen him make good plays. There's just something not right. Something looks just way, way off in everything I'm watching with him right now. But yeah, Michael Hawkins needs to go in. He needs to get all the snaps, because that's the amazing thing about last week. Guys, you know he wasn't getting first-team snaps last week. That was all Jackson Arnold preparing, going against a scout team, learning, them giving him Tennessee looks and showing a lot of the things that Tennessee does on defense. So there's no question. Like, Michael Hawkins needs to have the same thing with Auburn. And, guys, this is an Auburn team that just lost by 10 at home to Arkansas. This is a win Oklahoma needs to go get, and I don't care who the starting quarterback is. Oklahoma is a better football team, and Auburn feels like they're kind of on the ropes right now. I know Oklahoma fans feel like they're way down, and I get it. I really do. But you come out of this 4-1, this is what we talked about, guys, in the preseason. If Oklahoma could come out of this 4-1, okay, you're hoping for 5-0. It didn't happen. 4-1, going into Texas, you've got a week to continue to let Hawkins grow into things, get him 2 weeks of reps. You can build some stuff out. There's reason for hope there. But if that offense goes out and looks abysmal, I don't know that I had as much of a problem with the play calling as just the general plan.
Yes.
Guys, we are not – there's a reason I call it the Monday Morning Idiot. I have no ego about my ability to dissect football, but I could watch Tennessee for 5 minutes and realize Oklahoma was not going to run the ball right at them with any success, and they chose to do it. I don't understand. I don't know how – I'm not even going to say they missed it. They didn't miss it. They knew, and I talked about it in The Idiot. it's one thing to have limitations. It's another thing to ignore them entirely and just go with whatever you're feeling. Like, I don't understand that thinking.
Josh, how would you go about fixing it when you have an offensive line that's playing as poorly as they are? They're not getting a lot of push. What would you
fundamentally awful?
Yes,
just an awful group fundamentally.
Yes, schematically, what would you do differently than what they're doing currently?
I think you're going to do a lot. I early on, and you and I talked about this, George. I didn't have a problem with how they were using the run game. The jet sweeps to Deion Burks, the wide run to Javonte Barnes. Like, they were doing some stuff where you're like, yes, you can maybe make a profit outside the tackles. They were never going to live inside. Now, against Auburn, maybe it's different. Maybe again, I haven't really gotten to sit down and watch Auburn at that kind of level. I've watched them play a little bit. I watched some of the Arkansas game. They're not special up front. They're certainly not where Tennessee is. So maybe you can find some different things. But I want to get playmakers out in space. I want guys moving quickly. I know you've talked some about the zone read. I have no problem with that. If Oklahoma wants to move in that direction and do some of that stuff with Michael Hawkins, make it very, here's one, here is two. If it's not there, find your alley to run, Mike, and go make a play. Like, set up the next down. And I know that's going to feel like people are like, well, he's a better passer than that. He is. But he's also a guy that hasn't played much football. And I don't know how familiar he is with the offense at this point. You don't want to ruin this guy's confidence by trying to put too much on him too fast.
It's unbelievable just how bad, like, from a statistical standpoint, this offense is. It's one of the worst. It's flat out one of the worst offenses in the country.
Yeah.
And Josh, I don't know if you listened to the Eskridge Lexus postgame podcast. I think we had a very constructive conversation about the failures on Saturday night. 17 F-bombs, I'm being told. Well, they were all well-earned. It could have been 34. It could have been more than that. It seems like they can – that's a fair point. Kerry brings up a very fair point. More F-bombs in the Eskridge Lexus postgame podcast than points scored by the offense or by the team on Saturday night. Explain that to us somehow, some way.
That's a new analytic. We need to keep that one for
more
the record.
F-bombs than points scored is never good when we're talking about this. Where does it start, though? I mean, I think that, like, an obvious turnaround has to happen. A better game plan would probably put your players in better position to succeed. Do you think that they go away or do things differently with what they were doing with Jackson, or is it just completely scrap this thing and try to build up from the ground up?
For me, I think you're going to go with what you've done. Everybody's on the same page there. Like, that's your biggest problem is, okay, you're changing this for Michael Hawkins. Now, what's that?
Is everybody on the same page? Because it doesn't look like everybody's on the same page when we're talking about who needs to block whom on the line of scrimmage.
That is an entirely fair point. The thing that I would say, and I know the Michael Hawkins idea and the belief that we all share that he's going to start this week. Guys, we've talked about this for years. Coaches, and it's not just Oklahoma. I know OU fans think it's just Oklahoma. Coaches are reluctant to make true personnel changes until a loss happens. I don't know why that is. I don't know what it is. It's just like, well, it's working. We're winning. You don't make that change, even if they know a guy is not playing to a level they need him to. I can't explain that, but it's just kind of an unwritten rule almost. I honestly think we could see some changes. Like, I wonder if they're going to mess around with personnel groupings a little bit. They're going to do some different stuff offensively. Guys, at some point, and I'm just going to say it, Eddie Pierre-Louis needs some run at right guard. Like, Fabechi Nwiwu is not playing to any sort of level that you could say, well, we just don't want the errors out there. I've watched on the Idiot, I can't tell you how many guys run by Fabechi Nwiwu. I've seen him blow assignments. Like, I don't know what we're talking about if he's not going to be held to the same standard you're going to hold a young guy to. I don't get that. I don't know what that's for. So they've got to look at some stuff. I understand that some of it's injuries. Watching Branson Hickman, I thought there were good things But there's a part of me that's like, if he's still not right, if Troy Everett's actually close and he is some semblance of himself, get Troy Everett out there. I think he's a little bit better for what they want to do. He knows the offense more completely. He's been around it longer. And if he's like, unlike Branson Hickman, who's fighting through something that can be nagging and can kind of resurface at various points, once Troy Everett's healthy and up to speed, he's just healthy. He's fine again.
I think they're going to play Troy Everett at left guard.
That's what I was getting ready to go with. Heath Ozida and hand
Yeah,
up.
he's bad.
I think we were one of the groups of people that
100%.
were saying more Heath Ozida, more Heath Ozida. No more do I want more Heath Ozida. I want somebody else. He had a rough night on Saturday. What George said, your thoughts on him playing left guard. I mean, I can't believe we're talking about this going into the 5th game of the year, but here we are, or the 4th game of the year.
Fifth.
Fifth, you're right.
These people have effed my mind up. I might be losing it. Troy Everett at left guard. If Hickman can go at center, is that something that you would be interested in?
I almost would go. This might be crazy.
I'm not. Everything should be on the table
It's time
right
for
now.
crazy.
I'd
It's time
almost
for
go.
crazy, George.
I'd almost go with Josh Bates at center if he's your healthiest guy, and Everett at left guard to help him with the calls. Because if Bates is at least healthier, because I didn't think Hickman played terrible, but you can tell he's not healthy, and so that he got beat a few times. But I think you play Everett at left guard. And then you start Wee Woo, but I'm with Josh. I think you give a couple series to Pierre Louis and see what he can do. At this point, try anybody. And then I think you're set at your tackles for now. I just don't think Jake Taylor's gonna be back. Sexton hasn't been great, but like I still think he's probably your best option right now at left tackle, or else you're playing Howland. But I don't know, Josh. I think you got to play Everett in some fashion, whether it's at center or guard. I think you have to see him this week against Auburn.
How jacked has this become, guys? We thought the interior was where they were going to be okay. Like we thought, okay, we know that. Now what's going to happen at tackle? We were concerned about tackle. Now Tarquin's playing to a solid level. Guys, if you would have told me that, and I know you guys talked about it, that OU would have 2 turnovers in the Tennessee half, James Pierce would have almost no impact on the game, and they were going to rush for less than 3 yards a carry, I think OU wins that game. Like, you give me that scenario, OU wins that game almost every time. Like, it's almost unthinkable that they didn't in the way and that's part of it too. And I know we'll get to the defense a little bit, but like, part of it is our brains can't process this. Like, we're like, oh, it was a shit show. Well, it was a shit show back in the day. It was just that the offense was great, and you could kind of forget the defense because, hey, they were still going to outscore everybody by 10 points. So a whole other deal. But with Troy Everett at left guard, I don't love that. I don't. There's a big part of me that just says you're going to you want these young guys to play. You want them to get where you want them to go. They're going to go through some growing pains. Yeah. I think Heath Ozida against a really good Tennessee front, those are growing pains. It's going to hurt.
And it wasn't that
I think he'll be – go ahead.
Oh, it's just not that he was overmatched or anything. We're just talking about execution, right?
Yeah.
Which should 100%. Be very, very fixable. There was nobody, as he puts his head on his hands, there was nobody that knew more than him that he's the guy that missed the block.
Yeah. And that's the thing it's tough with this whole thing because
there's so many different things.
The execution thing, like, it's like, okay, well, the coaching staff is to blame if the players don't execute. But I also am like, well, I don't think Seth Luttrell and Bill Beadenbow are telling those guys during the week, hey, screw this up.
Sure.
Like, I think they're teaching them the right stuff. Maybe it's not getting through to them the right way. I don't know. Maybe they need to simplify some of it. I think part of it is continuity. Like they've had so many different guys in there. Maybe the communication up front's not very good. Maybe Jackson wasn't communicating the right protections up front. I don't know. There's so many unknowns with it, but it's the execution, man. It's really bad, but it's crazy because like I was going to bring this up, but I don't know if you guys saw my tweet the other day, but you look at OU's offense through 4 games, 77th in scoring offense, 119th in total offense, 125th in third down conversion percentage, 125th in explosive plays, and I compared that to the 2018 defensive marks on that side of the ball because I feel like it's flipped, right? 2018, OU's defense was 101st in scoring defense, 114th in total defense, 119th in third down defense, and 113th in explosive plays allowed. Like, it's basically a 180 of what it was, 6 years ago. The problem for Oklahoma with that, in which they won, 12 games that year and had a Heisman Trophy quarterback, it's a lot easier to overcome defensive issues, I think, in today's college football world than offensive issues. If you can't score and you can't move the football, you're not winning a whole lot of football games. And Kyler Murray isn't walking through that door. As good as we think maybe Michael Hawkins can be someday, and maybe even this season he's a good quarterback, he's not Kyler Murray, at least not yet. So I think that's the concerning part. And that team in 2018 didn't play the gauntlet that Oklahoma has left on its schedule.
And all of this is, I think, like, that's the big headline, is Oklahoma offensively coming out of Saturday night, when, I think that what the defense did, Josh, they played their ass off. That was one of the better defensive performances we've seen in a long time. And it was not just a week ago that we were talking about going into the Tennessee game, the major challenge that was coming with Nico and the Tennessee offense. For the most part, and I know that there's a big conversation about this on social media, just in terms of, did Tennessee get conservative? Yeah, they did. It was good coaching that they got conservative in the second half. But from what we saw in the first half, OU defense played very, very well on Saturday.
It really was a strong performance. I've had all these Tennessee people in my mentions that are acting like to say that it is some slight to Tennessee. Tennessee was the better team. There's no question. But for Oklahoma to keep answering the bell the way they did, kept getting put in bad situations. And guys, not just bad situations, but after you had created a good situation for your offense, to immediately twice be thrown back out there on the field when you're thinking like, okay, we're going to get not only are we going to get a breather, we're going to come back and the game score is going to be different. We've got a chance for some points here. And none of that happened. And guys, when you were asking me the question, Eddie, it made me think, is this not a lot like the 2009 Nebraska game where Landry Jones had all the interceptions and Oklahoma's defense kind of kept answering the bell? The difference is Tennessee had a functional offense and a quarterback that was capable of hurting Oklahoma, and he did a couple times. And that really is why Oklahoma couldn't quite claw their way back into this game, while Nebraska was never able to pull away from that 2009 team.
Josh, obviously just in particulars or individuals that played extremely well on Saturday from the defensive side of the ball. Robert Spears-Jennings was incredible, led the team with 13 tackles on the night. Just in terms of guys that really impressed you, Lewis Carter had 2 tackles for loss on Saturday. There was a lot of guys that really popped.
Yeah, those two are kind of the flashy ones that stand out. A guy that I thought, I think George and I maybe both had this question, both in George's mailbag and me with the board chat last week, about, is Dominic Williams worth what Oklahoma did, for him in NIL in the offseason? Is he proven that he's worth that? And I thought he played a whale of a game against Tennessee, especially after going back and watching it and really being able to kind of go forward, back, slow things down and kind of see. He was everywhere. He blew up several run plays that I think were actually going to be kind of fruitful for Tennessee, and he stuffed them. So I really thought he had his best game at Oklahoma so far. Another guy, much more quiet. I know, I heard you guys, obviously, in the Eskridge Lexus postgame pod, talking about Danny Sutzman having 3 tackles. And I think that was the design of the defense. Oklahoma worked so hard with that 3-man front to clog that from basically tackle to tackle. And then they wanted Robert Spears-Jennings and Kendall Dolby or Sammy Amasigo, whoever's playing Cheetah, flying up and making plays that spilled. Anything that came outside the tackle, those guys needed to come clean it up. And that way they could leave the rest of the defense to deal with any of the one-on-one passing scenarios. So Oklahoma had to make some choices, but I thought the defense played really well. And the guys, maybe the thing that impressed me most, and maybe we can get into this later, but just I want to be able to say it, they played young guys in the fourth quarter when that game was still, everybody's still working. And Jaden Hardy's out there. David Stone's out there. Guys that we haven't even seen that much of. Yeah, David Stone right here. There was clearly there is some growing belief in some of the young guys in that defense.
Maybe nobody more impressive than Eli Bowen getting an opportunity at quarterback. When they saw 23 get out on the field, it was noticeable. They were attacking him, and he definitely responded.
Yeah, lots of young guys. But how about one guy I want to point out, older guy that we were just watching the clip, Trace Ford.
Trace Ford had a great game.
Best game as a Sooner. I thought he was
first sack as
spectacular. He was really, really good. I thought that he played well. They played him at some different spots. Like he wasn't just a rush in. Like they dropped him back a few times and kind of was playing almost like a linebacker spot. But I thought he was really good. Jaden Jackson, I think, continues to be, as a true freshman, just a really, really solid player for Oklahoma. That entire defensive line really was just an awesome unit the entire game. Jaden Hardy coming up. I mean, I think he only had like 2 or 3 snaps, but he comes in and makes
a big play.
Yeah, tackle for loss. So you feel great about the defense,
sure.
even long term. Like I was sitting there like thinking during the game, I was like, man, like I know they're losing Danny and Billy next year, and maybe Kenai Walker, right? I think Kenai's a senior. They're losing some veteran pieces, Woody Washington. But you look out there, and some of the young guys that are making big plays, you're like, damn, these guys, they've got some studs on the defensive side of the football.
It's just incredible. And, Josh, we talked about it. We spoke about it on the Eskridge Lexus post game. It just the polar opposites in looking prepared, executing a game plan, to a certain extent, just the straight up physicality of the two groups. It's like how are these the same team? It's dumbfounding to me.
How are these teams practicing against one another?
Well, every offensive player is hurt.
Some of it would rub off, right?
Every offensive player is hurt. I think we're figuring out that there is one side of the football that's a lot more physical than the other.
I mean, and that's the thing. Like, it's just this offensive group looks, I don't know, just whipped. Like, I don't know of another way to say it. They look like they don't have any answers. There's almost nobody out there where you're like, yeah, I like it. That was one of the things I noticed about Michael Hawkins. Like his body language. He looked like, okay, let's go do this. We're going to make some plays. We're going to get this done. The only other guy I felt like the 2 guys that I could say that for at this point in the year have been Deion Burks and Javonte Barnes. Those guys both look like, hey, I'm ready to go. We can do this. Like we're going to keep our head up about it. And guys, you saw it on the sidelines. You had Kip Lewis trying to pep up like everybody. Like who is doing that on offense? Who is calling anybody, like this isn't good enough. This is a problem. Like we should be hearing talk of like players meetings and stuff. Like, I mean, and maybe they're happening and no one's hearing about it, but guys, the coaching is not there. I have problems. I've mentioned several of them. They're not coaching these guys to do these things. Like there has to be some accountability from the players of they're not holding up their end of the bargain either.
It's so interesting because it's funny. Everybody wants to be, well, where's the leaders? Where's the leadership on the team? But I'm genuinely asking that at this point. Like it's reached a point where it's like, who are the leaders of this offense?
It's very identified on the defensive side.
Oh, yeah, because like tonight we're going to be talking to players at media availability, and I was trying to think on my way to the office today, who should we request? Like, who's the voice of the offense that we need to hear from tonight to be like, hey, guys, we're going to figure it out. We haven't lived up to the standard. And I just went through every player, and I'm like, I don't know who that is. Maybe Javonte Barnes?
Yeah.
I don't know. Deion Burks, he's a transfer, though. Like, that shouldn't be somebody like you. Who is that guy? Is it Jacob
transfer
Sexton?
that kind of sounds like checked himself out of the game in the late stages of that one on Saturday night.
Jake Roberts, I don't know. Like, I don't know who that is. I do think Josh is right. Hawkins came in, was a gamer. You could also see him on the sidelines. He was clapping. He was getting in some guys' faces.
He was active on the sidelines before, and this was something that I noticed before the quarterback change even was made.
He was it looked like he was being vocal. Mm-hmm. So maybe he can spark that. Maybe he can be that leader they desperately need. But what an indictment to this offensive group if the true freshman backup quarterback has all of a sudden become your leader.
Yeah, and a guy that obviously is leaping through the air as he hit the ground, and you could hear it in the sights and sounds here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel. There weren't a whole lot of great offensive highlights, but I did include Michael Hawkins, basically his leap through the air. When he hits the ground, I thought he was seriously injured.
Yeah.
And I think that to a certain extent, you endear yourself to your teammates when you put your body through that down. It was 2 scores, but basically it was like 2.5 scores, really, if you're having to get both of those 2-point conversions.
The other guy I'll say that I think you can see him, he's at least being vocal, supportive on the sideline, Casey Thompson. I do think that he's somebody that maybe guys look to, but you're talking about the third-string quarterback.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, man. It's just, you would have expected Nick Anderson to be that guy. I don't know. I just don't, and I don't know what his situation is.
Sure.
But I don't. At this point, you cannot count on him playing for you right now.
Well, that gets to a wide receiver position that obviously is going through it. They have a bunch of true freshmen that are out there that are trying to find their way. I thought it was notable just in terms of you see Jalil Farouk and Jaden Gibson out there cheering on their teammates. Basically from the sidelines.
2 guys that would have been leaders for this team.
And 100%. I mean, when we're talking about just what you said, 2 guys that you could probably depend on to come answer the questions on a Monday night, they're no longer available, which kind of leads us into a story that we put up and we broke on Soonerscoops.com's Crimson Corner this afternoon. Jacobe Johnson is moving to wide receiver. They're exploring the idea of moving Jacobe Johnson to wide receiver. Again, it's not like this is a one position or a one player that will change everything on the offense, but you got to start looking at other options at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, the staff met with Jacobe, I believe, today and basically explored the idea of him, possibly moving or at least practicing this week at wide receiver. So they're going to test it out. And I think it's one of those things where you look at Jacobe and he's 6'2", 200 pounds, gives you a little bit bigger target, obviously going to be a really physical guy. They just haven't been able to produce those younger guys, those younger wide receivers. That doesn't mean Zion Reagans or Ivan Carrion or Zion Kearney won't be good players in the future. Maybe they will be, but they need some new production there. I think they need some bigger bodies. I mean, we've talked about it on here a lot. When you're running out there and it's Deion Burks, Brennan Thompson, and Zion Reagans, that's a small lineup. Yep. That is not a big group. And, I know Josh and I were talking off the air, but even if Jacobe can come in and just be a better blocker on the perimeter for you and be a physical guy, that could help this offense because that's somewhere that, we talk about the offensive line not being able to block. The receivers and tight ends have been abysmal on the edges, on the perimeter, blocking. So I don't know, Josh, you saw Jacobe a lot as a high school player. We know he was super productive at Mustang High School, over 1,200 yards, over 1,200 all-purpose yards as a returner and receiver. Is he a guy, Josh, that you think can be a playmaker in this offense? I know that's asking him a lot to do on short notice, but what do you think about the move?
Oh, I mean, Jacobe is a guy who could have been an OU recruit as a wide receiver. Again, guys, I don't want to rewrite history. I thought coming out of high school, I was like, I wonder if he will be what they need him to be at corner, and I kind of thought like maybe he ends up back at receiver. So I'm not saying this is how I thought he was going to get there, but this was always possible. He has talent. He 100% does. I mean, this is a guy, Eddie, I would be interested if we could do the stat, but like over his last 2 years at Mustang, I've got to think there have not been many Oklahoma receivers in the last decade or more that had more like 180-plus yard games, like 200-yard games. Like when he would go nuts, he really would just put on some massive performances. So I do, but George, and kind of in the vein of what you were talking about of our conversation off air, there's a part of me that like just wants to stick him out there in wide receiver blocking drills and him to watch some of these other guys do it and be like, no. Let me, like, even if he doesn't really know about blocking, just to show him the intensity that is necessary, because there is so much of it where I'm like, that's just passive. It's not that they don't care. It's not that they're not trying. It's just like blocking is so much just will and effort. Like if you will work at it, work hard to do it, you'll usually get enough in the way to do what you need to do. And there's just some of it where you're like, guys, I don't know how much you care about this. Like it looks like wanting to run the next route rather than like, if we can get this block. The Javonte Barnes, the long run at the 17 for 17 yards, OU's biggest run of the night. There's more there if Oklahoma can pick up a block. And I understand the receivers are undersized and that's going to limit things. But there's just not enough I hate this term because I don't think I should be allowed to use it. I'm not cool enough to use it. But there's not enough dog in these guys sometimes. Like, get out there and mix it up. Like, get a personal foul, for God's sake. Like, do something that's like, I'm here. We're going to fight this out. We're going to do what we have to do.
I think
sound like
another way to say that is I think the receiver room is a little soft right now.
It's hard to dispute that. Josh, you sounded like Small's mom in Sandlot, MILF, by the way, trying to get him to go outside and get his knees dirty. It is it's wild, and we've covered Jacobe, obviously going all the way back into his days over at Mustang High School. But I went back and I found an interview that you did with Jacobe. Just kind of it was before, I think he was committed. Obviously, I think it was before he signed, spring of 2022, talking about playing both sides of the football at Oklahoma. And here is that interview from the spring of 2022.
Is there one you prefer? I mean, is there something you, whether more comfortable, like it better? I mean, is there one you lean to?
Well, I started on defense, and a lot of times I can see myself being a DB in the NFL. But, I mean, wide receiver just came into the picture, so, like, I'm not really sure. I feel like it's going to be one of those when I get there, when I get to college type of decisions. I want to try to pick a dominant position, but, like, I want to do a little bit of the other one, just a little bit of both, kind of.
That was Jacobe Johnson talking about possibly playing both ways at Oklahoma. Now, it will be interesting. I think, obviously, because of the depth at quarterback, they feel pretty good about moving Jacobe, right? And maybe the situation at wide receiver is that dire that they just have to make this move, or at least try to make this move work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is dire at this point, and if Jacobe,
it's anything on the table right now offensively, you could talk me into.
100%. I mean, I joked with you a few weeks ago that they should maybe look at Billy Bowman moving to wide receiver.
Yeah.
He was a great receiver back in high school as well, but I don't know. I mean, I don't think you can sit here and say Jacobe all of a sudden is going to just be a contributor offensively this week, especially. Maybe he can get out there for a few plays and help you out in some different schemes, and maybe this week you tell him, hey, we're just going to teach you, these 4 or 5 different plays, and you're going to be in there for those. But I think that it's more so you get the bye week, he gets more reps, and then maybe against Texas you see a little bit more of him. But I think everything's on the table. I don't know, man. It's never good when you have to move somebody positions like that. You're in a really tough spot. Not only as that unit, but your offense, if you're looking for guys like that to have. I mean, did you remember, was it 2019?
DJ Graham?
No, it was Trajan Bridges, remember?
Oh, yeah, moving to safety, right?
Moving to safety for a week, and he actually never ended up playing safety, I believe.
He did, I want to say, but it wasn't very much.
It wasn't in meaningful playing time.
No.
So I remember that was a huge ordeal.
I thought you were talking about DJ Graham tried to make.
And
the
you've
move
seen
over
it.
to wide receiver
I heard.
well.
I think it was maybe it was Bob. I think it was Bob Stoops talking about it a while back about moving Andre Woolfolk over to corner. It's a little bit different transition, I guess, when you go to the defensive side, but they did that, I believe, mid-season, and he played well. He ended up being drafted at corner, so I don't know. It can work, but it's usually not a good situation if you're having to do that.
Be interesting. It's an interesting time to be covering Oklahoma, obviously. And Josh, we have been approved. You can use the term dog because of our friends over at Schwab, which is now a sponsor with us here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. So we always like the people of Schwab. Lastly, before we get out of here, so we talked about the quarterback position. We talked about, just game plan in general, schematics, blocking, fundamentals. None of it's good right now. It has to improve offensively. Just in terms of Monday Morning Idiot, before we get out of here, let's go with the positive side because we're positive people. Was there anything that stuck out to you that maybe you didn't think on Saturday night that you're like, okay, maybe that was not as bad as I thought it was? And you can say no if not.
No, there were, and it is because I am, like I was talking about earlier, as you're with the fans and you're, interacting with them on social media and stuff, it's hard not to get swept up in the same stuff. Like, oh, this is terrible. This is awful. I want to be real careful because I'm not saying it was good. Pass blocking was not horrific. Like it was okay. It was fun. Like, it wasn't exemplary. There were some bad misses. You guys, I'm sure, are referencing it when you talked about the Heath Ozida mistake. He missed a bad one that just left Michael Hawkins hung out to dry at one point. So I'm not going to say it was great or special or anything like that. It was okay. Like, if your quarterback's playing good football and your receivers are healthy and everything else is fine, it would have been fine. You wouldn't have noticed pass blocking and said, oh, that's a problem. So I think that's what this group excels at. I think that's where they're most comfortable. I think it's not a very physical group, guys. It's just not. And I don't understand that from a Bill Bedenbaugh group. That's not what we're at all accustomed to. If there's one thing you would say, it's that his guys are going to come out and try to beat you over the head with a club. And that's just not the way they're playing football right now. Look, for those that like looking for a good example, look at the safety. Watch that offensive line come off the ball at their own 2-yard line, knowing they're running a dive up the middle. And it's just, there's a lot of standing up. There's no movement downfield. It's very, very strange.
It's interesting because I think that in pass protection, OU's pretty good up front in pass protection when they know their assignment, right? Like the times that it breaks down is when one guy goes the wrong way or doesn't know that they're picking up the blitzer or whatever it is. That's when they break down, which can't happen. But when they do a pretty good job at it. The opposite is in the run game. Not only do they not know what to do and they make those mistakes every once in a while, like right here, but right here, they just get whooped. Right? Like in the run game, when they are trying to pound the rock for just like right here, it's a clear, like we just have to get the ball past the goal line. They aren't physical enough up front. Whereas pass protection, the only times they really get beat is when they have a miscommunication. When they run the football, they cannot get push.
Which just
makes
everything
just
worse.
Quickly, Eddie, one thing.
Yeah.
Kerry, run this back one more time. I want people to watch Mebetchi Nwiwu. It's exactly what George is talking about. This guy is going to go across his face and just run into Javonte Barnes. There's not even a hint of slowdown from that defensive lineman. He is lined up on Mebetchi Nwiwu's outside shoulder, goes across his face, and Nwiwu barely throws an arm at him. That's not acceptable. Like, that's not at a level, that's not something an FCS school would accept from their offensive lineman, much less an FBS guy that we're, to this point, have kind of treated like he's above reproach, he's fine. He should be battling for his job this week. He was bad against Tennessee.
Unbelievable. It's just...
Is it? But see, we keep saying that. We keep saying it's unbelievable. I can't believe this is happening.
To be this bad, yes.
I know, but like, yeah, you're right. But like, it's also like the signs were there. Like, and that's what I want to like say is like, we knew I don't think we knew it was going to be this bad, but like, they've put themselves in this hole. Like
sure.
This is a problem that they created for themselves, whether it be
outside of the injury stuff, which is
but like even the injury stuff, they on Saturday, 4 of their 5 guys that we thought were going to be started for Oklahoma.
Sure. I'm just talking about as a whole, which adds into it's one of the pieces.
I mean, it's unbelievable that it's this bad.
Is so bad.
Yeah, it's unbelievable it's this bad, and at a program like Oklahoma, it should never be this bad. But like, it's also like, man, we knew the offensive line wasn't going to be great this year. It's like, and they put themselves in this spot. Like, then that's the part that it's like, you want to be like, how did it get this bad? And,
sure.
And I think we know the answer. It's like they whiffed a few years in recruiting. They made maybe some misevaluations in recruiting on some guys.
It's the side of the portal that Oklahoma fans haven't experienced, where you bring a guy in or guys in, and it's not working out.
Yeah, and I think, and it's not even, for me, it's not even the portal thing. It's like the fact that they had to go get 5 guys in the portal at one position, and I get it, it's the offensive line where you need a lot of guys, but to have to get 5 guys and you're starting 3 of them, like that's a really bad situation, and that tells you that, one, you missed in recruiting, and some of the guys that you did get haven't developed the way that you wanted to, and whether that's because they aren't as good as you thought they were or because you haven't developed them, either one is an indictment on the coaching staff.
Yeah, it's 100% on them to get this thing figured out as Oklahoma heads down to Auburn. 2:30 kickoff on ABC, so the national audience gets to see that display yet again. Kenai Walker, Peyton Bowen, Brennan Thompson, Luke Elzinga, and Kip Lewis are your captains going into it, which, you know, when you're not playing football and you're doing the game-by-game captain stuff, it makes it even more of a whatever.
Well, how about it's all defensive guys plus the punter and Brennan Thompson? I mean, it's tells you
not too many options to pick from on
Exactly.
the offensive side. All right. I don't think anybody out there is feeling better about the situation, but we did want to stop down and give you a little bit of a Monday game day rewind. Josh, we appreciate it. We'll let you go finish up the Monday Morning Idiot on the Crimson Corner, and we'll roll over to some interviews tonight with some of the players, here from what they have to say. Brent Venables obviously coming up on Tuesday at 11:30, previewing, probably talking a lot about what's going on with the quarterback situation and everything from the Tennessee game going into the Auburn game, the first road trip of the season. And we'll be back here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel with a practice report on Tuesday evening. So for Josh and George, Josh, I think I just tried to put an R in front of your name, but we'll go on from that. For Josh, for George, I'm Eddie. We'll see you right back here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel.